Hi, my name is MachineRite, and this is Understanding Fortnite. So following up my video where I talked about transferring skills into BR, I told you to make your mechanics as implicit as possible, and this is basically step one. Aim is the most important mechanic in the game. If you can't land shots, then you're not going to be able to trade damage properly. And because it's so important, I figured I would make it the first fundamental skill that we focus on and try to make as implicit or automatic as possible. If you don't know what I'm talking about, definitely check out my video talking about why your creative skills won't transfer into BR. I go into all the science of how your brain learns and how your brain performs when it comes to gaming, and it's kind of just like the core of pretty much everything when it comes to getting good at a competitive game. So the main thing that we're going to be focusing on, and the main problem that I see with people's aim, is they're not keeping the center of their crosshair on target, or the center dot. Often I see people putting their bloom over their target, or their bloom indicators over their target, and just leaving it at that and thinking that's good enough. But the way Fortnite works is it actually sends more bullets dead center than it does in the random bloom area. You can see in this test here, I have two scenarios here. They both have almost the same amount of bloom over the target, but you can see the one where I'm putting the center dot on the target's head is consistently landing way more headshots. The only explanation that I have is that Fortnite just puts more shots dead center than it does in the random bloom area. And I think this is why you see a lot of controller players landing tons of headshots just doing a full spray, just because aim assist always favors putting the center dot on target. It doesn't really put the bloom in the same way someone on mouse and keyboard would. It wouldn't put the bloom over the target. All aim assist cares about is getting the center dot on target, and that's what it helps with. So yeah, the main focus throughout this whole routine is going to be getting in the habit of focusing on the center dot and getting the center dot on target. So you may notice this is actually a different map. This map is actually focusing just on ARs. So you can pick up all the ARs that you want to use, and then you can come over here and you have the auto reload. This map is still not totally finished yet. I will have signs saying what everything is. So if you come on this first one, this drill is to practice your recoil control. I think recoil control often gets overlooked because of the bloom. Like I said before, people just having that habit of putting the bloom circle over their target instead of putting the center dot on target. So all you're going to do here is just start shooting at this target and just try and keep your crosshair as steady and center as possible. You can see I'm actually doing a lot to control it, because if I wasn't controlling it, it would just go up like this. And there's actually quite a lot of these at varying ranges and varying difficulties. And the way that I recommend you practice this is put a full clip into each target with each weapon. You don't have to use like guns that you don't want to use. So you can see when it gets a bit farther away, it actually becomes a bit more difficult to control the recoil. You can see here where the target is almost the same size as the center dot. It's kind of also just showing my theory of Fortnite sending more shots dead center than around the bloom circle. You can see here with keeping the center dot on target, you're actually landing way more than you really should. Way more than you should if it was totally random. Okay, so when you're done, you're just going to come out through this teleporter and then go on to the next scenario. Now this is basically almost the same thing, except now you have a moving target, so you can practice controlling your recoil while aiming at a moving target. And then you can basically build structures and elevate yourself every clip. And yeah, you can basically continue unloading a clip at each height. Just go up and unload a clip with each weapon that you plan to use. And then throughout all of these, the range just gets larger and larger. Okay, so the last one is going to be almost the same thing, except I have some verticality going on. This is actually surprisingly difficult, because now you're going to have to control recoil downwards, and you're also going to have to track upwards and downwards at the same time, so it actually becomes a little bit strange. And I think this is why a lot of people miss AR shots. And by the way, I recommend practicing with the blue AR, because the Scar actually has much less recoil, and it's probably more effective practice to practice with the harder and more common weapon that you're going to be using. And then this course just continues, the targets go the other direction, and the range increases. Okay, so now we're on the aiming while moving map. This map is mostly focused on shotgun aim. Now the shotgun on this map, like I showed in the video before, is not going to register a hit number unless the target is actually dead center. And another thing I want to mention is when you're shooting at moving targets, a habit people have is they put their crosshair on target and then they stop moving their mouse and then click. Almost like they're shooting a stationary target, but you can't really do that at all. You have to put your crosshair on target and assume that you're going to keep tracking it, and basically just shoot while you're tracking it. Often what I see when I recommend this is people will put their crosshair on target and then they'll try to track it for a long time and then shoot, but then they still have the same habit of stopping their crosshair before they shoot. So you have to make sure that you're almost cutting through the target and shooting. And for whatever reason, that analogy just works for me of just cutting through the target Now actually my weakness, and what's actually a little bit different, is when you're shooting a target that's coming towards your crosshair, that tracking motion doesn't really work as well, and it's almost just like a timing thing. You have to, then you can actually almost stop your crosshair when that's happening. Okay, so the first scenario, and probably a really good warm-up. If you don't have time to do these other scenarios, I would say that this is the best well-rounded warm-up, is this scenario. Okay, so for this, you want to focus on staying on this white line and basically countering your crosshair direction with strafe movement. I have a video on a standalone map that has a similar course like this. In that video, I have my whole keyboard overlay so you can actually see what I'm doing. So I can't walk straight forward towards the target because then I fall off, and I can't walk straight this way because then I have to aim, and then I'm going to be walking over here. So to stay on a straight path, I have to walk diagonal. At some point, I have to stop that diagonal movement and switch to normal strafing, and then I have to continue that diagonal movement again as I come back here. All these jumps and obstacles are basically just meant to practice adjusting your crosshair for your movement. This first target is the target that you're going to land the most shots on most likely and land the most damage on. So I would basically just play this alternating sides until this target dies. I would actually just only use the SMG for this because the rest of the map is going to be all shotgun, so you don't really need to practice shotgun as much. If you really want to practice shotgun on this, I would just do one run of shotgun and then continue the rest with SMG tracking, because there's no other SMG tracking sections in this map. And same thing as I've been saying the whole time, always want to keep that center dot on target. That's the only thing that matters. Don't worry about the bloom, just put the center dot on target. Okay, next is the ramp shots. Now you see these targets are really small, and someone was complaining about how small these are, but if you compare it to my character's head, this is about the same size, maybe a little bit smaller. I wanted to make them a bit smaller just because of how predictable these targets are, and most of the difficulty comes here from the added movement involved. You're basically creating the randomness and the difficulty by moving. Remember that you're only as good as what you're aiming at. If your discipline is basically landing a shot on a massive target that is very easy to hit, then your whole consistency and accuracy is going to revolve around the size of that target. If that target is bigger than a player model, then you're not necessarily going to have the precision to shoot against anything smaller than that target. But if you're shooting at a target that is the same size or even smaller than what you need to be aiming at in game, then you're actually practicing the precision that you need. Okay, so the way I go about this is I like to alternate where I jump from as much as possible, and I also like to take my time against these targets just because they're so difficult to hit. It takes a while in my warm-up before I can start flicking against these. So the way that I'm going to recommend you practice this is, instead of timing yourself, try to land 3 shots in a row on one of these while jumping. And landing 3 shots is in, you actually see that white number. What this is going to do is, this is, instead of just timing yourself, you're actually going to be focusing on what you're doing, and you're going to be focusing on trying to build some consistency. Then you're actually taking your time and watching the target and figuring out ways to make your shot actually consistent. So just going into jumping and landing shots on these might be difficult to do right away. So what I recommend you do is, if you miss a shot while jumping, on the next ramp, just stand here and try and land a shot while stationary, and then continue on the next one, and then jump, take a shot, then if you miss again, do another stationary one, and just continue like that until you kind of have the actual flick motion and everything built up while stationary first, and then you can add in the jumping after. And like I said, just do this until you can land 3 jumping shots in a row, and maybe after a week of completing that, increase that to maybe 4, and then the next week increase that to 5. Just remember that as your skill improves, your practice routine has to improve with it, or else you're just going to plateau. So the next course is the low ramp shots. So the difficulty in this drill, and the reason that I created it in the first place, is to challenge this awkwardness of looking down. When you're looking down, you can't just move your mouse and look horizontally like you normally would. You have to do this awkward movement where you're actually looking up to aim more forward on both sides. And if that angle is totally awkward to you, what I recommend you do is drill that I call vertical flips. And basically what you do is you look all the way up until you get locked by the limits of your camera, do a 180, look down again until you get locked, and then do a 180 again, so it's like this. Eventually you can get it very smooth. And yeah, aside from that, there isn't really anything special you can do other than just trying to fight this movement and learn how to do this awkward movement. If you jump from the sides, I would say that's kind of cheating, because that makes it so much easier to where you only have to worry about one movement. I would try to jump from the middle as much as possible because that's going to give you the greatest challenge. Same as the last drill, try and land 3 in a row and then continue on to the next one. So next drill is ramp shots high. This one's going to have a similar approach as the normal jump shots, where we're going to jump out, try and land a shot, and if I miss, then I'm just going to stand where I am and try and land a stationary shot, and then continue on, try and land a jump shot, and if I miss, like I did, land a stationary shot, and just continue this. Yeah, and same thing, just try and land 3 in a row, and then obviously increase that as that becomes easier for you. The next drill is jump peaks. This drill actually has a practical use. If you actually are in a box like this, you can actually use this jump peak, and it is an advantage for you. So to do this, you can't jump straight up because then you're not going to get an angle. You actually have to jump backwards, and that's going to give you that slight window to shoot. The way that I practice this is I go for my shot like normal. If I land, then I go to the next target, and if I miss, like I just did, what I would do is I would actually keep trying on this target until I hit it, just to kind of get used to that angle of this target. And if you can't hit these at all, what I'd recommend is actually standing back a bit, because the more you stand back, the more window you're going to have to shoot. The only thing is this is not an advantage for you at all if you're actually doing this in a game. The only time you have an advantage is when you're right up against the wall like this. This is when you actually get the advantage here. So yeah, same thing as all the other ones, try and hit 3 in a row, and obviously continue that as that gets easier. Okay, the last one is falling shots. I have a very similar approach to practicing this one as the normal jump shots. So I drop down and go for a shot, and if I miss, I go and try and land a stationary shot, and then once I land a stationary shot, I continue on. And I basically just continue this until I land my goal of 3 in a row, or however much you want to give yourself. So yeah, that's pretty much it for that. If you have Kovaaks, what I would recommend you do is actually play Kovaaks before this, and hop into this immediately after you do Kovaaks. And that basically, what I think that's doing is relating all of the skill that you've just practiced in Kovaaks, because often there's almost like a disconnection with that game and this game. I find it's better to play some sort of aim intensive thing right after you play Kovaaks, and just try and like relate that skill as much as possible, as soon as possible. So just remember to focus on that center dot crosshair with all of these. Ignore the bloom for now, just focus on the center dot, and your aim will definitely get much better. So yeah, that's it for this video. Thanks guys.